We see it across nearly every discipline. A very small fraction of people, elite athletes, top CEOs, pioneering scientists, manage to consistently outperform their peers over decades, maintaining a pace that sidelines most others. The common cultural assumption is that these individuals have access to an endless reserve of drive. We tell ourselves they simply want it more, or that they were born with a superhuman tolerance for hard work. But behavioral science reveals a very different reality. Researchers like Daniel Kahneman have shown that willpower is a finite biological resource. It depletes throughout the day with every decision you make, exactly like a draining battery. This chart highlights the problem with relying on sheer effort. Motivation is a highly volatile emotional state. It spikes after a good cup of coffee and crashes after a poor night of sleep. Mathematically, a volatile emotion paired with a depleting resource cannot drive decades of sustained success. So, if motivation is unreliable and willpower always runs out, what biological mechanism is actually keeping these high performers moving forward? The answer is that they don't try harder. Instead, they reprogram their neurobiology. They restructure their brains so that doing the difficult thing becomes an automated default, and it begins in a window of just a few milliseconds. This 3D model shows your brain's default setting when confronted with a stressor. The moment you face a difficult email or a sudden conflict, your brain's alarm system, the amygdala, fires off an immediate, deeply emotional reaction. But highly effective individuals execute a biological intervention. They engage their prefrontal cortex, the brain's logic and reasoning center, to create a physical pause, sending signals that physically intercept and suppress that emotional alarm. Stephen Covey captured this principle long before we could image it in a scanner. He noted that between a stimulus and our response, there is a space, and in that brief space lies our freedom to choose our actions. Forcing that pause takes immense effort the first time. The biological question is, what happens when you make that choice thousands of times? Through the biological rule of neuroplasticity, neurons that fire together wire together. Your brain optimizes for repeated behaviors. Every time you choose to act on your core values instead of a fleeting mood, you lay down myelin, an insulating layer that thickens the neural pathways responsible for your self-control. Through this habit formation, your brain physically restructures itself. Eventually, executing a proactive, disciplined choice requires vastly less cognitive energy than giving in to a reactive emotional outburst. This biological control doesn't stay confined to your personal habits. The exact same mechanism dictates how we manage relationships, teams, and entire companies. Psychologist Daniel Goleman documented this when he popularized the concept of emotional intelligence. His research reveals that managing human relationships relies on the precise same executive functions in the prefrontal cortex as managing your own diet or schedule. In conversation, the same executive control allows us to inhibit the immediate impulse to share our own perspective. By delaying the gratification of being heard, we create the cognitive space required to genuinely model another person's point of view, the basis of empathy. That suppressed ego and active listening builds psychological trust. And behavioral data is clear. Trust is the mandatory prerequisite for high-performing teams to stop competing internally and begin cooperating. Elite leadership operates through the scaling of these individual neural pathways. A leader who can regulate their own emotional response effectively provides the psychological safety necessary for an entire organization to move from defensive competition to collaborative trust. We often look at people who achieve massive success and assume they are fighting a grueling, exhausting war against their own laziness every single morning. This visualization shows the reality. They have successfully engineered an internal ecosystem where doing the difficult, proactive thing is now the path of least neurological resistance. Sustained, decade-long success is not the result of dramatic, exhausting leaps of effort. It is the result of compounding biological interest. These microscopic daily repetitions gradually strengthen the neural architecture of the prefrontal cortex. Over years, this physical reinforcement shifts a person's default behavior until proactivity is no longer a choice, but a definition of who they are. So don't try to overhaul your entire life overnight. Focus solely on mastering your next millisecond pause. Because every single time you intercept a reaction, you are physically laying down the neurological tracks for the person you will become tomorrow.